Aaron O'Toole, socialist crusader. So right off the top, this is some garbage. There's no way, the conservatives are currently pulling a Doug Ford. Doug Ford told a whole bunch of lies on the campaign, didn't do anything he really promised to do. All the things he said he wouldn't do, he went ahead and did, right? We had a basic income pilot here in Ontario that they just literally were asked straight out, are you going to get rid of it? And they said no, and literally the first thing they did was get rid of it. Because conservatives hate poor people. It's very straightforward. And as I go through this, you're going to see the entire platform of the Conservative Party is to do two things. One, get their majority, right? And then two, control dissent, right? Because there is an upswell of communist support that is coming out of the country. And the conservatives are fairly aware that if all they do is go in and act like conservatives, they'll be ousted pretty quickly. So what they have to do is play that liberal game, right? Of looking like they're doing stuff, but doing everything they can to preserve the capitalist system, right? So what better way to go through this than to take somebody who is this delusional? Like, this is delusional, right? There's no way that Aaron O'Toole's a quote-unquote socialist crusader. Like, it's just like, that's a joke. The policies put forth by the Conservatives are serious, sensible, and pro-worker. They're also impressive when put next to the anemic NDP platform. The anemic NDP platform of effectively taxing the wealth away, which is actually how you deal with billionaires, right? If you have a parasite in your system, you need to get rid of the parasite. Aaron O'Toole's strategy is to keep the parasite in place, but put like little roses and flowers around it so that you'll be like, oh, it's such a nice parasite. It may surprise you to hear a conservative bemoan the decline of private sector union membership, Aaron O'Toole told captains of industry last year. But that's exactly what the conservative leader did. In a speech to the Canadian Club of Toronto, no less, he lamented that there was once a balance between workers and business. Today that balance is dangerously disappearing. Too much power is in the hands of corporate and financial elites who have been only too happy to outsource jobs abroad. It was a curious line from the leader of a party that's rarely been a friend to organized workers. But, at the time, that's all it was, a line. O'Toole had offered no particular course of action on how to remedy the growing imbalance between boss and employee, corporation and worker, and the Conservatives continued to struggle attracting new voters. That is, until O'Toole unveiled his election platform. In his beefy campaign document, O'Toole offers a number of clever, innovative, and forward-thinking policies that could be a real boon to workers in Canada, from those with strong unions to those who know the precarity of gig labor. So they're really buttering us up. They're really looking at the worker and the working class and trying to sucker us as much as possible, right? We should be hard-nosed and skeptical the entire time. Like, until literally the billionaire class is gone, we should believe that we are in the midst of a class war. And so here's the attempt at negotiation, right, that is coming from the sociopathic parasite class. Workplace democracy. O'Toole's platform calls for 4 major things to give workers a voice around corporate governance and economic policy. Remember, anything except anything to keep you doing all the work while they do nothing, right? So require that large federally regulated employers, either those with 1,000 or more employees or 100 million in annual revenue, have worker representation on their board of directors. So you put one guy on your board of directors, call him a worker representative, and ignore him, right? That's essentially what happens. And gullible workers who are stupid enough to vote conservative in the first place will sit there and be like, yeah, we got representation on the board. It doesn't matter. Like, so point one, already total bullshit. Like, total bullshit. If you're stupid enough to believe that that is a point, that this actually matters, then you're stupid enough to vote conservative. Provide tax breaks. always tax breaks, right? To employers, right, who sell shares to employee ownership trusts. Oh. So how's this helping the workers exactly? Not near as I can tell, this is just a way to keep workers in line, right? That, oh, we're selling you employee ownership trusts that are only good if you're working for us, doing all the work while we do nothing, right? The real benefit is for the employers. So, again, workers, go fuck yourself. If you're stupid enough to believe this is going to help you, you're stupid enough to vote Conservative. Amend the Canada Labour Code to give workers a leg up when trying to unionize shops in companies with a history of anti-union activity, especially large multinationals. So this is what I like to call Trojan horsing, right? This is called Trojan horsing, right? Amend the Canada Labour Code. Certainly, they're not going to do other amendments to the Canada Labour Code, right? Certainly, they're not going to include a bunch of other changes to the Canada Labour Code. No, they're just going to focus on, yeah, we're going to give workers a leg up when unionizing. Yeah, that's what we're amending the code for. Everybody focus on that. Don't focus on the other thing over here. Again, if you're stupid enough to believe this, you're stupid enough to vote Conservative. Give labor unions standing at the Canada International Trade Tribunal to file action against companies. Give labor unions standing. I see what you're saying. Give labor unions standing at the Canada International Trade Tribunal to file action against companies. So once again, like, unions by and large work with the capitalist class now. If you have billions of dollars, it's extremely easy to buy unions. So this is more Trojan horsing, right? If you ask me. So again, if you're stupid enough to believe this is going to help you, you're stupid enough to believe that you should be voting for Conservative. Putting workers on boards is not only a brilliant idea, but it's been standard policy in Europe for decades. Originating in Scandinavia, has become popular in France, Germany, and a number of other countries, right? So when it happens in places like France and Germany, it means that the board gets about 50% control, worker control. That's 100% not what's going to happen here. So if you, so for example, in Germany, the law is if you have a big multinational corporation, half the shares must be owned by the workers, period. Half the shares are owned by the workers. So that's your like Walmarts, right? Your Targets, your McDonald's, like all these places. Half the shares are owned by workers, right? There's a reason why the minimum wage in Germany is in like the mid-20s, right? And it's because workers are actually given power. This is not what we're talking about here. Creating one seat to sit on a board of 10 people who will be ignored roundly. Like it's so obvious. It's so obvious that it's grifting. Like that the Conservatives are taking successful policies elsewhere, gussing them up and pretending like that's what they're going to be doing. It's so obviously controlling dissent. A recent study from the UK-based Centre for Economic Policy Research, very trustworthy source, by the way. This is essentially a far-right neocon organization. You really, really shouldn't be trusting organizations like this. Like, literally, it's like, you know, an institute funded by Darth Vader said that Death Star production is increasing jobs. Like, that's the kind of shit that you're getting from these guys. Looking at Germany's example, 3 huge benefits for companies and workers alike. 1, capital increases rather than decreases when workers get seats on the board. Yeah, when workers get an appropriate amount of seats on the board, not the one that they're going to end up with. 2, outsourcing goes dramatically down as firms decide to produce more in-house rather than buying intermediate inputs from suppliers. Yeah, again, the same story. It's not going to happen. And finally, that worker productivity increases. Since when have the capitalist classes actually genuinely cared about that? If the capitalist classes genuinely cared about worker productivity increasing, we would have a 4-day week. That would already have happened, right? If they genuinely cared about worker productivity increasing, they would have raised the minimum wage to $30 already. They don't care about that. That's not a. They've never cared about that. That as long as you are doing all the work, and they are doing none of the work while getting all of the money, they're happy. That's how they've always operated, and I have no reason to believe anything these guys say. Like 0%. 0% of any of this should be believed for a second. We should assume that these are lies, and then watch as the lies unfold, right? Hans Bockler Foundation, a German trade union think tank, boasts similar numbers. From productivity and economic returns to innovation and job training, workplaces with worker representation on the board, usually referred to as co-determination, simply perform better. You see how they're trying to convince you that this is what the conservatives are actually pitching, right? It is not what's going to happen. Like, I cannot stress this enough, that the conservatives are liars. They're not very effective liars. If they were more effective liars, they would have been in power for longer. Just take a look at the liberals, who are far more effective liars. This election seems to be the moment when the liberal grift is sort of coming to an end. And so what do? We go back to the conservatives, because we're very gullible. Given the federal government only regulates about 18,000 employers, largely in telecommunications, transport, banking, and a few other sectors, there are roughly 750,000 workers in the country who could expect to see a direct result of these measures. Even still, it's a novel idea that could inspire provinces to follow suit if it was done, which it won't be. One measure that may have wider application is the creation of employee ownership trusts, a vehicle for shares in the company owned by employees. If an employer sells stakes in the company into the trust, they'll enjoy a break in their capital gains tax. Yeah, tax cuts for the rich. That's how workers do better, right? Workers do better with tax cuts for the rich. That's 100% how this grift works, right? These two levers of employee ownership of corporations are fairly radical in North America. In fact, getting more workers on boards was a core policy plank from erstwhile Democratic presidential hopeful Elizabeth Warren, while the idea of employee corporate ownership trusts was pitched by her rival Bernie Sanders. Vox called it his most socialist idea yet. In fairness to both O'Toole and Sanders, the Conservative want to incentivize the contributions through tax breaks, whereas Sanders wanted to mandate such contributions, right? Like, you can't govern if you're a conservative, right? You always gotta give a tax break, and that's all it is. It's just a way to do tax breaks for rich people again, right? And sure as shooting, there's going to be a way for them to reclaim any losses that they accrued from having to sell these shares to these workers, right? While it's not exactly clear how it will take shape, there's the key phrase right there, right? While it's not exactly clear how it'll take shape, yeah, it's pretty clear, right? That they'll do everything they can to undercut workers as they do while pretending as though they give a shit, so that the gullible populace will be placated and not do what must be done, which is overthrow the system of capital that is clearly failing. Like, clearly failing, right? Like, and the fact that they're even talking about this tells you how desperate they are, right? The fact that they're even playing this game tells you that they are aware that the system that they are propagating has failed, and that it is going to continue failing, and that if they don't at least begin talking this game of actually helping citizens, they're never going to be able to seize power. If the populace is extremely gullible, which this election has revealed outright, like, I mean, has there ever been a more gullible populace than this one? We're just going to hand it over to them, and then what are they going to do? They're going to totally fuck us over. They're going to just, like, slap a sticker on something and say, yeah, we did it. And, like, I don't know why we would ever believe these guys. Like, why would we ever believe these guys? While it's not clear exactly how it will take shape, O'Toole's camp is also proposing measures to help workers in anti-union workplaces, citing examples of large multinationals like Walmart and Amazon firing workers who attempt to unionize. The Conservatives are suggesting that they would work with unions to find solutions to help union workers organize. While it's not clear exactly how that would work, it wouldn't. Ottawa can't regulate provincial workplaces. It's nevertheless an intriguing commitment that could seriously advantage workers who are most in need of representation or most at risk by asking for it. Like, how dare this article get made and published in Maclean's, right? That the tone of this piece is so literally like a wank. It's just like walking up to the conservatives being like, yeah, conservatives, you're the greatest, right? It's obviously bullshit. You should be reporting on it like it's obvious bullshit. Articles like this are why people are turning to people like me, right? Articles like this are the reason why people like me are picking up numbers. Why people are going like, hey, my mainstream media sounds like a bunch of dumb bullshit, and only gullible morons would listen to it. Well, here's a great example of that. Just a gullible rube writing what is obviously like a pro-conservative puff piece in order to con gullible workers into voting conservative so that they can get betrayed by them. Like, it's obviously what's going to happen, right? Like, how do I know it's going to happen? Because it's all the conservatives have ever done. It's all they've ever done. It's all they've ever done. Like, literally, you are trying to convince me, like, no, you can go into that room with that knife-wielding psychopath who's stabbed the last 40 people that have gone in there. It'll be different this time. He's not going to stab you with the knife as he's covered in blood. Like, he's looking into the camera being like, hey, guys, I'm completely better now. Yeah, I'm totally better now, you know? In fact, here, what I'll do is I'll take the knife and I'll put it over here. Look, I'm not even holding the knife anymore, guys. Just come into the room. Everything's better now. That's literally what I see when I see the Conservative Party. I see a knife-wielding, psychopathic murderer covered in blood who's already murdered my friends and family, staring into a camera saying, no, I'm done murdering people. And the idiots in the room around me are going, like, maybe he's telling the truth this time. Like, that's literally what's happening. And it's insane. It's insane that it's happening. Like, we are this dumb, right? Like, we are this dumb. Other measures, like giving unions standing at our International Trade Tribunal, could be interesting, if modest development. In 2019, the United Steelworkers secured a victory at the tribunal after it found that 4 countries had been dumping steel into the Canadian market, harming domestic industry. The proceeding only began because a private company filed the... What's a recession? Only real policy wonks picked up a particularly radical proposal from O'Toole's platform. The Conservatives are pitching a super EI that would temporarily provide more generous benefits to employees in a recession. 75% of their previous salary as opposed to the 55% status quo. So that's just liberalism, right? Like, that's just some liberal shit right there. Like, this is what's so embarrassing about the liberals right now, right? Is that they're being out-liberaled by the conservatives. That the liberals could be standing up and saying exactly all of this. Like, they could be running this grift too. They could be saying all this nonsense bullshit, right? They just don't, right? Which flows into my larger sort of point about the liberals these days, which is that I think Trudeau is done. I think he's ready to go. Like, I think he wants to retire. I think he wants to leave. I don't think he wants to be the prime minister anymore. How do I know that's the case? Because he's not running a campaign, right? Like, he's letting himself get outflanked on the left by the conservatives, who are obviously sociopathic liars. So, like, but that's not the radical part. Oh, here we go. In determining when a province falls into a recession, O'Toole would use the SOM rule, a thus far relatively obscure definition of recession that tracks unemployment, not GDP growth. Okay, this is actually kind of interesting because, as I say on this channel over and over and over and over and over and over again, neoliberalism is a farce. It is a fraud. It doesn't work. It's not an economic system. It is a religious ideology. I will fight anyone who thinks otherwise. Like, it's childishly easy to point out how failed a system neoliberalism is and how it is not an economic system. And one of the big hallmarks of neoliberal capitalism is its manic drive to venerate GDP growth and use GDP growth in a manner that the inventor of GDP tracking said, do not use it for these purposes, right? That tracking GDP growth was actually invented for a very specific, very narrow reason, right? That, oh, you gross domestic product, you want to track that for just like a very narrow bandwidth useful sort of thing off in a corner. But to treat it like it's the only thing that matters for your whole economy, even the guy that invented it said, no, don't do that, that's dumb. Don't do that, that's dumb. And there are many cases where GDP growth lowering is actually good, right? It's actually good for the society to have GDP growth go down. But at the very least, the conservatives are starting to acknowledge that, oh, we've been financially illiterate this entire time, while pretending like we know what's going on. We currently consider ourselves to be in a recession when the whole country sees a contraction in its GDP over 2 consecutive quarters. It's a useful definition because it's an international standard, but it's not always reflective of the real health of an economy. Oh, yeah. So everybody's been doing this wrong because neoliberal capitalism is a scourge that has inflicted the entire planet. And now we're starting to say, oh, maybe we should actually track real things, like unemployment, right? Like real stuff that actually happens. O'Toole, for purposes of EI anyway, would consider a province or territory to be in recession if the employment rate raises by 0.5 percentage point over a quarter. A recession ends under this application of the Somme rule after 3 months of job gains. Of course, job gains could be like, yeah, you work 5 hours a week, right? Like, job gains is always going to be like the least, like, oh, a guy is working 5 jobs, so job gains, right? The Somme rule to this point has largely been used for analysis, not policymaking. Nevertheless, Claudia Sam, who came up with it, was giddy to see it in the Conservative platform. I jumped for joy, Sam wrote in a recent blog post. Yes, of course it's cool to see my Somme rule in a platform. What really makes me happy is that the unemployment rate, not politics, would decide when the unemployed would get extra financial support. Here's a crazy idea, just spitballing. How about we give people support regardless of their employment status? How about, crazy idea, crazy thought, how about everyone just gets support? And that it's not tied to anything whatsoever. That you get enough support to have food and shelter. And that is a guarantee, and it's built into the system, and there isn't some stupid, wonky, little checkbox, little means test, little dumb thing that you gotta go through in order to pretend as though people should now have food and shelter, right? And of course, all of these analytics, yeah, you're telling me that a conservative government, especially after I read this, where literally intel that would have been absolutely crucial for Canadians to know about a housing market, that was suppressed for 25 years. You're telling me that the same governments are going to be completely honest about unemployment numbers? Going to be completely honest with, it's the unemployment. Yeah, it only went down by 0.3%, so no extra benefits, right? None of that kind of shit. Right? Like, this is so obvious, like, capitalists, like, this right here is capitalists getting on their knees and being like, please let us keep being in charge. Please let us keep abusing the elderly and the disabled and the poor. Please let us keep just destroying the country and destroying the society so that a couple of guys can get a couple of billion extra dollars. Please? We'll let you pretend like we care about your opinion. We'll let you vote for a guy so he'll sit on a board and we'll ignore him, right? Like this is conservatives and this is capitalists negotiating. We should not be negotiating with these guys. Our entire platform should be get rid of the capitalists. Get rid of them. Do not negotiate with them. They're not even willing to offer rational things. They're not even willing, like, if these guys were coming out and saying, hey, we're going to do a basic income, I would be like, okay, cool. Now you're rational, right? Now you are someone that might be worth negotiating with. That's not what they're doing, right? They're doing basic liberalism, offer the barest minimum, and then make sure you don't do that in the first place and undercut it as best you can. And a gullible, rubbish population is just going to go, oh, look, it's a worker. Yeah, he's putting a worker on the, yeah. Like, none of that is going to matter. None of that is going to matter. They're still going to fucking get rid of you the second it makes them a penny. They're still going to undercut you. You're not going to be able to buy that stupid house, right? None of that shit's gonna happen. They're still gonna send cops against you as you're homeless on the street. They're still gonna do all of that shit. Everything is gonna be completely normal. It's, well, completely as it is now. Except, oh, now there's a worker on the board. Yeah, I'm so happy that I let the conservatives come in and gut everything so that we could fucking get a worker on the board. Yeah. Oh, and something for the gig workers. Yeah, here we go. It's taken this election for politicians to finally start talking about what it means to protect workers in the gig economy. They don't give a fuck about these guys. Like, these guys are the degenerates. These are the people that politicians spit on. Tell them to get a better job. Tell them to get another job, right? Like, they don't give a fuck about these guys at all. So let's listen to this gullible, rubish bullshit that you have to absolutely, like, put a fucking nail in your head to actually believe. Gig workers who do everything from drive Uber to delivery groceries to coding and designing, you know, actual workers who are actually doing the actual work of the society, while the conservatives go off and do fucking nothing important whatsoever, which is why we should get rid of the capitalists. Probably outnumbered shy of 2 million before the pandemic, would likely only increased in numbers since then. Around 3 million Canadians are self-employed or freelance, according to Statistics Canada. These workers, generally speaking, don't have any benefits we associate with employment. If they want supplementary health insurance, employment insurance, Canada Pension Plan benefits, they have to pay for it all themselves, which is the goal of the Conservative Party. It's to get rid of these people and ultimately to dismantle all of these things, right? The Conservatives are proposing a rather elegant solution. Oh, an employee savings account. Gig economy companies would have to pay contributions. Oh, so they would have to pay for it. Equivalent to CPP and EI premiums into gig worker accounts where it will sit tax-free to be withdrawn when needed. Maybe actually call these guys workers. Maybe actually insist that they get supports. Why are we insisting that people's support is tied to working for a capitalist? Why are we insisting that people's support, whether they get food and shelter, is tied at all, under any circumstances, for any reason, to this capitalist death cult? Can anyone explain that to me? Can anyone explain to me the rationale, on any level, in any way, of subserviating ourselves to a death cult in order to get food and shelter? Why are we tying these two things together? We've already all agreed that doing that with healthcare was an incredibly bad idea. You think doing the same thing with food and shelter is a good idea? That's the goal of all of this, by the way. The goal of all of this is to convince gullible morons to keep subserviating themselves to a capitalist death cult that wants to continue throwing people into the streets, that wants to continue destroying the civil society, while you do all the work and they do nothing important whatsoever. So, the conservatives are an employee savings account. Gig economy companies would have to pay contributions. So gig economy companies would have to start treating their workers as if they were workers. Whoa! Big fundamental changes here, guys. Fundamental shifts in the way the society operates. Companies have to treat workers as if they're workers. Holy fuck. Here's a better idea. Support workers. The workers will turn around and tell these companies to fuck off or die, and hopefully many of those companies will die because they're sociopaths. And then the companies that actually want to stick around will be like, well, better actually offer things. Better actually treat workers like human beings, right? Nope. Instead of that, we're going to tie everything to the workforce. So if you don't work, you starve. That's the capitalist system. Sure glad we're negotiating with that. Sure glad we're voting conservative, yucka-lucka-luckles. We're a bunch of fucking rubes, man. It's hardly a replacement for a good pension plan or an actual safety net. Without employee contributions and considering the hours worked by the employees, these funds will likely be quite modest. Yeah, fucking irrelevant. And yet, it's more than other parties are proposing. No, it isn't. Straight up, no, it's not. Like, unless you're trash. Like, unless you genuinely believe that the capitalist death cult is actually interested in helping anybody. Like this fucking moron is, obviously. Like, the capitalist death cult is interested in abandoning us and lying to us while doing it. Like, do you guys not realize, like, do Canadians not realize that, like, these conservatives are shameless? That they will lie about literally anything? And do so shamelessly? Aaron O'Toole, Social Democrat. Oh my god. It seems unlikely that the measures outlined above will start peeling off new Democratic voters or convince the Marxists, Leninists, and Communists to put aside their differences to get behind Aaron O'Toole. This is a huge win for us. This is a huge win for the Communists. This is a huge win for people like me. The biggest reason, the number one reason why I'm going through this article like this so thoroughly and being so fucking aggressive about it is to just point out how massive a win it is. That Maclean's, while publishing an article that's literally wanking Aaron O'Toole off, pretending like he's a social democrat and not a fucking sociopath, like literally sitting there with a knife covered in blood, is the fact that they have said Marxists, Leninists, and Communists. Like, we're here. Hello. Pay attention to us. We are real. We exist. We are going to destroy the capitalist system. That is the goal. We don't believe this horse shit. We know that this is horse shit. If you believe this, you are extremely gullible. Like, extremely, extremely, extremely gullible. Right? That you no longer, like, you shouldn't make decisions for yourself. Right? You genuinely should not be making decisions for yourself. If you're reading this article and being like, wow, Aaron O'Toole, a socialist? What a time to be alive, right? Don't fucking make decisions for yourself. After the major victory of the Marxist, Leninists, and the Communist Party, and yet these policies are serious, sensible, pro-worker, and decidedly conservative in purpose. Well, they are certainly decidedly conservative in purpose, right? Because the purpose is to continue maintaining the grift, that you do all the work, while the capitalists do fucking nothing. They look particularly impressive when put next to the anemic New Democrat platform, which is verbose, yet shallow when it comes to the tough realities facing many workers in precarious jobs across the country. Yeah, because passing a basic income would be meaningless to those people, right? Putting in major permanent support systems would be meaningless to those people. Nobody can doubt the New Democrats' working class bona fides, but one can wonder if they suffer from a lack of competition on that front. What the fuck? Oh my god. The Liberals, meanwhile, need to convince workers that they and they alone can manage post-COVID recovery with compassion and competence. If O'Toole's policy book is any indication, the Liberals' job just got a whole lot harder. That's true. That final line is actually true. Because Canadians are gullible rubes who are completely willing to go along with any grift that they're told by anyone, they're actually looking at this, an article like this, and being like, oh, wow, O'Toole's a socialist, like they're fucking morons that they are. And so the Liberals actually do have to be like, oh, shit, the Conservatives came up with, like, a super good grift. Oh, man, what grift are we going to run?